All right. Well, while I'm sitting here watching this rigged baseball game, I wanted to make a follow-up video to the video I made last night. I said, who knows if the story is gonna get any bigger or whatever. I didn't think it really would. It really didn't get much bigger. There's just this little, tiny little article about it, but it has some very interesting things about it. Also, some very interesting coding. So, anyway, one person died and it was over a dice game. That's pretty much all it says. But like, look at the ambulance here. In the last videos, I've been talking about the numbers 91 and its mirror, 19, 71, whatever. Just tons of stuff. If you go back and watch the other videos, even the last video, I explained it a little bit. So the ambulance or the fire truck right here is number or 19. It must be like the whatever it is, the precinct number, because later on in the video, the ambulance also has a 19 on it. But look where the shooting happened. 33rd Avenue North and John A. Merritt Boulevard. Interesting, 33. I mean, this number is always associated with the articles about murders and death and whatever. So let's look up John A. Merritt Boulevard in Gematria. Well, if I could spell it right, it needs another T there. 191. I mean, what are the odds of that? I talked about the 91s and the 191s like crazy. This happens on John A. Merritt Boulevard. And the reason that this article even stuck out to me was because I read an article just the other day, and it was about, that's a different one. It was about the same campus, literally had a shooting of 3 students wounded in a college party on the same campus October 14th, so 9 days before. And also at the same campus, there was a shooting on August 19th. And even look at this, 141. April 1st is 4/1. It is also the 91st day of the year. So interesting. I've even made tons of videos dealing with the 41s. Especially in the Nebraska games, Skull and Bones adds up to 41. But look where this one happened. Or the car drove up to 33rd Avenue. It even says, fearing they'd be shot, police said they drove until they reached 33rd Avenue North, where they called the police. Interesting they would stop there. But what stuck out to me, so this was the first one, or whatever, August 19th. And if you go to October 14th, it's a span of 56 days. But if you go to October 23rd, it's a span of 65 days, the mirror. Well, that's interesting because I've talked about Abraham Lincoln and how I think they're coding Abraham Lincoln because they're going to assassinate Obama. Him and Obama and Lincoln are the only presidents politically from Illinois. Tons of other stuff with it, but, you know, they were running a whole Civil War, domestic violence type theme in the news as well. They still kind of are. Every day you hear about, oh, the cop beat up the black guy, or you've got to feel sorry for the cop, this or that, just to divide everybody. But literally, Abraham Lincoln died at the age of 56 in the year 1865. He also died in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. adds up to 56. And just for whatever, I want to throw this in here, Adolf Hitler also adds up to 106. He even died at the age of 56. He even died in the year 1945. Interesting, I've been talking about Chicago Cubs like crazy, and the number 45 over and over and over, and how it all even ties into all of the 91 stuff. Chicago Cubs even adds up to 91. I even talked about how it was kind of odd that they came out with this movie Lincoln in 2012. Just out of the blue, they make a movie about Lincoln. But it came out in the United States November 9th, 2012. November 9th, 2012, if you go to Abraham Lincoln's, the anniversary of his death, it's a span of 5 months, 6 days. So interesting, it would come out on that day. Interesting, too, if you go from 4/15, the anniversary of his death this year, and you go to the day of this recent shooting at Tennessee State, it's a span of 191 days. And if you go to the one that happened before it, 9 days earlier, on 10/14, It's a span of 182 days. Interesting because 91 plus 91 is 182. And if you go to the original one that I talked about that happened in August, on August 19th, it's a span of 126 days, also 4 months, 4 days. I talked about Obama being the 44th president. There's tons of 44 references that I've mentioned over and over. I just don't have enough time to keep doing it. Interesting, too, I talked about how at the college, it was its 303rd anniversary, or actually 103rd anniversary of this college. It was on 6/19 of this year. And if you go to the most recent shooting, it's a span of 126 days as well. And look, May 6th is 5/6, like 56, the 126th day of the year, with 239 days remaining. Very, very interesting. We've talked about 230 died. It's the 239th year of the United States this year. Pope Francis came to the United States, or he went to the White House on 9/23. At 9:23 p.m., he's the 266th Pope. 9/23 is the 266th day of the year. Tons of other stuff with it. It even ties into the 52, or the 52nd prime is 239. We've been seeing 52 a ton. Princess Charlotte was born on 5/2. And the reason I even mention that is because the other section here is 33rd Avenue North. And if you type that in Gematria, 33rd Avenue North, it adds up to 122. The 122nd day is 5/2. Even if you do this backwards as 2/21, like February 21st, is the 52nd day of the year. Tons of other stuff with this as well. Another thing I've been talking about a lot is blackout. They foreshadowed blackout a whole bunch of times, maybe to get the black guy out of the White House, or maybe a power outage. Power outage adds up to 56 as well. And before I get too far, I want to show the gematria of just Tennessee. Tennessee, 106-34, also with the S exception. This website doesn't do it, but instead of S being 1, it would be 10. So 1 plus whatever, but it would be 10, so it would also be 43 and 52. That ties in with the 122 and the 239. Another interesting thing is October 27th. There are 65 days remaining until the end of the year. This day is special to Back to the Future. It's when the Royals won the World Series in 1985. It's the last day in Back to the Future where the time machine gets destroyed by the train. This year will also be the 333rd year that Philadelphia is founded. Interesting because Tennessee State University even adds up to 333. I've talked a lot about the University of Nebraska as well. University of Nebraska at Lincoln, 333. Also, Nebraska plays Northwestern this week, and they play in Lincoln, but Northwestern is a college or a university or whatever that's in Evanston or Evanstown, which is a suburb of Chicago. Also funny too, clear back, I think it was after this game or this game, I talked about this game to be played or whatever, and that I said Nebraska is most likely either going to be 5-3 or 3-5 after this game. So if Nebraska loses, they'll be 3-5. Anyway, also, November 5th is the day with 56 days remaining, the Mirror of 65. Interesting day, because that also ties into Back to the Future. That's the day they go back in time to 1955. I talk about how it all ties into Pope Francis. For whatever the reason, it's all about Pope Francis. Like, there's tons of stuff with Pope Francis. I've showed it multiple times, but he became Pope on 3/13 of 2013. But the 65th prime is 313. The 56th prime is 263, which interesting to me because this year will be a leap year in 2016, and the 263rd day of the year will actually be September 19th. And it's normally the 262nd day, but it's the mirrors of 91 again, 91, like 9/19. And it's also another interesting day because when I first started making these videos, I made a video about Ramona Quimby, and they copyright struck it on certain days and whatnot. It led me to I predicted something big would happen on 626 even because of it. Tons of 62 stuff they showed me. Because of the way they copyright struck my videos. And then literally they had gay marriage was legalized on 626. It's also the halfway point between the 88th day of the year to 923. So 329 to 923, the mirrors. 626 is 89 days after 329, and then 89 days later, it's 923. Queen Elizabeth is 89 years old this year. On 8/9, she was queen for 63 years, 6 months, and 3 days. It's the 221st day of the year. The 221 is the backwards 122 that goes with the 52. Also, 144 days left until the end of the year. Mentioned 144, I don't know how many times. Just want to point one out that I don't ever talk about. The 144th prime is 8/27. August 27th is the 239th day of the year. Also, normally, the 91st day of the year is 4/1, so the 41, but this year will be a leap year, so it will literally be 3/31, or also, in England they write it as 31-3, kind of like 313, which I talked about. 313, 313, Pope Francis, mark of the 600, 6 score, and 6 adds up to 313. Also, if it's not a leap year, the day Pope Francis became Pope, to the 91st day is a span of 19 days, the mirror of 91. I also forgot to show the gematria of September 19th, like 919. It's 91. What are the odds of that? Also, I've talked about lots of 91s, but World War II began on 9/1, so 91. Also, I mentioned the Nebraska Cornhusker, the guy from Herbie Lovebug died on 9/1 this year. That's when I started noticing all this 91 coding. But the word 91 adds up to the same thing as Revelation and Valentine's. Even if you take 56 plus 65, it gives you 121. Just like Revelation adds up to. Even 191 adds up to 229, like a leap year, which is also Gregorian and Julian. It's 313. Pope Francis even came to America on 9/22, the mirror of that. Also, it adds up to 103. 9/19, September 19th. There's 103 days left until the end of the year. I also talked about how I think the World Series is going to end on this day. Just a special day. I've seen it a ton of times. 113, a whole bunch. But anyway, if you go from Obama's 54th birthday to that day, it's a span of 91 days. Also wanted to point out Emancipation Proclamation adds up to 113. It was even originally written on 9/22. Even the Book of Mormon I talked about, that's 239 chapters. Joseph Smith was allowed to get the golden tablets on 9/22. So I know this whole video wasn't really about this shooting, but it kind of was, because they coded the 56 and 65 in here. Some other coding all stuff I've been talking about. It's just a puny little article. Who knows what the real purpose is. But one last thing, I'm just going to end the video on it. I talked about Abraham Lincoln then, and Obama maybe being assassinated. That's what we've been talking about for probably 6 to 8 months at least now. But literally, James Garfield was another president who was assassinated, and he died on September 19th. So 9/19. Also, his name in gematria, James Garfield, adds up to 56. And one last thing here, Barack Obama adds up to 68. And literally the word 68 in Pythagorean gematria adds up to 56. So I guess, who knows? Another interesting thing, in none of these articles, the 3 articles that I read, it doesn't show if they ever found the killer in any of them. So, interesting. Maybe there's going to be another one. So, I guess something to look out for. And like I said, like a minute ago, I'm going to end it. So, have a good night.